This week, we continue our sermon series on the book of Ruth. We're looking at this small little book that's in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is written before Jesus came. And so we're looking at this incredible love story. And today, it actually comes to fruition. We get to see this love story actually come about. And so a quick recap, if you haven't been with us, there's a couple names you need to know before we get into our text for today. What happened is there's this woman named Naomi. And she lives in Bethlehem with her husband Elimelech and their two sons. And all of a sudden, there's this huge famine in Bethlehem and all of Israel. So all of the land that God gave his people, there's this massive famine. So Elimelech, her husband, decides we are going to move to Moab. These are pagan people. These are people that are very far from what we believe. They're not good people. They don't believe in God. They do very wicked things. But he decides, you know what? They have food. We don't. We're going to go. We're going to raise our family there. So they leave. It ends up that they get there, and Elimelech dies, and her two sons marry Moabite women. And so then the two sons die as well. And so Naomi is left in this pagan land with two Moabite daughters-in-law. And she says, you know what? I hear the famine's over there. I'm going back to Bethlehem. And so she leaves, and one daughter-in-law stays, and the other one is Ruth, the one that the book is written about. Ruth. And Ruth says, wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. I'm with you. And so she goes. And so they arrive back in Bethlehem, and everybody says, Naomi, it's been 10 years, look at you. And she says, no, don't call me Naomi. Naomi means pleasant or beautiful. And she says, call me Mara, which means bitter. She said, I left here full, and I came back empty. I left with everything and everyone I loved, and now I come back with nothing. And then poor Ruth is standing next to her like, hi, guys. I'm Ruth, by the way. And so Ruth is there, and here's the problem. They have no prospects. They are two widowed women. They can't own land. They own nothing. They have no way to provide for themselves. And so Naomi says, look, Ruth, my daughter-in-law, you need to go out. And we have this rule in Israel that widows and those that are destitute and poor are allowed during harvest time to follow after the harvesters. And anything that drops to the ground is allowed to be yours. So go find some field where you can do this. Go find a person that's practicing this that would allow you to be there. Be careful because you have no rights here. Any man could just grab you and do whatever he wants with you, be abusive to you. You have no rights here. Be careful, but go out. We need food. We got nothing. And so it just so happens, and we talked about this last week, there are no coincidences with God. It just so happens she finds her way to a field of a single, wealthy, godly man named Boaz. And as she's following along and working hard, Boaz just so happens to show up and go, who's that young lady? And the workers say, well, that's Ruth. She came with Naomi. And it just so happens that Boaz is a relative of Naomi's dead husband. And he goes, I heard about this story. I heard that she came back with her and she's trying to help take care of her. Let me be generous to her. And so he meets her and he gives her tons of food and he says, you know what? You don't have to wait for stuff to fall. You just go with my harvesters and you grab stuff and so that you're taken care of. And so that's what we saw last week. We saw this incredible provision that God gives her. And then the chapter just ends. It says, and so she worked for a couple months of the harvest. And we're like, really? Like, come on, what's the rest of the story? What's going to happen? Are they going to get together? Are they going to get married? What's going to happen here? And so that's where we go for today. And today, this is really fun. This is a cool story because how many of you can remember, you don't have to raise your hands because you might be sitting next to your spouse. How many of you can remember summer love? Isn't that such a fun concept? You know, you went away to summer camp or you had some summer job and you know that you just got the summer, right? And so if, you know, I can remember my stories, you know, it was like, man, if I could just get her phone number before the end of the summer, this could make it. We could have a chance, you know? And so you set those goals for the end of the summer, like, I'm going to get a kiss, like something big. Well, this is the same thing with the harvest. This is the story that we have. Naomi and Ruth are there during the harvest time. Ruth is working in the field of Boaz during the harvest. If something doesn't happen before the end of the harvest season, she's not going to see Boaz for a long, long time. He's given her enough food to take it for the whole year. He's given her enough food to provide. So she's really got no other chance here to bump into him. So this is it. Like, we're coming to the end. It's the end of the harvest season, the end of this. And what we're going to see is two women get impatient on waiting on a guy to make a move. Any of you women ever had something happen like that? The guy in your life or a guy that you know just wouldn't make the move and you got too impatient? Yeah, so that's what's going to happen. So these two women are going to hatch up a plan, and they say, all right, we're going to get you married, girl. Let's go. And so they are going to hatch a plan to make this happen. And this is truly just an unbelievable story. It's like, it's kind of like, I don't know, the guys and girls are different. When my wife and I watch some like cheesy chick flick, I end up like halfway through going, oh, come on, like, oh yeah, he just so happened to, be the mystery man and he's million, and I look over and I'm like, this is so corny. And Joe's got this huge smile on her face, little tears in her eyes. And I'm like, seriously? And she's like, it's a sweet story, whatever. And so this is truly one of those stories. Like, the stuff that happens in this story, you're just like, no way. But here's what we're going to learn today. And today, this is for singles. Today, as we wrap up, I got some things to say. If you're single right now, I got some things to say to you. But here's what we're going to learn. Not only does God provide for us protection, not only does God provide for us with wisdom, not only does God provide with us with provisions, God provides for us in relationship. He is the one who created love, passion, intimacy, relationships. And not only does he provide for us in the tangible things, he is also the author of love. He created it. He knows every element of a good love story, and we're about to see it. So we're just going to dive right in. We got a lot to do. Ruth, chapter 3, starting it off. One day, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, my daughter, I must find you a home for you where you will be provided for. Basic Hebrew translation there, Ruth, we need to find you a man. That's what that says. All right. Now, Boaz, whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley in the threshing floor. So just a little bit, if I'm from Florida, I don't know anything about harvesting, so maybe you do, but let me tell you what this means. So at the end of the harvest season, they would get all the wheat together, and they would take the pitchforks and they would throw it up in the air, and the chaff would blow away, and the grain would be heavy, and it would fall. So that's what they're doing. This is the very last night of the harvest season. They do this, they winnow all night, and then they sleep guarding their grain all night. And so they have a big feast, and then they guard their money. And so before they cash out here. So that's what's going to happen tonight. It's the last night of the harvest. They're winnowing. They're going to have a little party, a little celebration. They're going to spend the night there near the grain, guarding their grain. And so that's what's happening. So Naomi comes up with a plan. The mother-in-law says, listen, girl, this is what you're going to do. Wash. That's always a good start. Put on perfume and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. And so what we see here, Naomi, it's not like she doesn't usually wash or try and look nice. She's telling her, do yourself up in your best outfit. Like, this is it. Like, you need to show that you are available. You need to show that you are not a widow anymore who is mourning. You need to show that you are available for interest here. So that's what she tells her to do. And now Naomi has a very, very, very sultry plan here. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do. Not the best advice in the world. I will do whatever you say, Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. Now, this is a very big deal, okay? We have a Moabite worker who has no rights, who is a slave in the country, who is going to go to the owner of the field, an Israelite landowner, and try and make a move. This is pretty dicey. This could go wrong very quickly. Okay, so let's see what happens. Verse 7 through 9. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly and uncovered his feet and laid down. In the middle of the night, he got startled by something, probably a cold breeze up, anyways. And so he woke up in the middle of the night and he turned and there was a woman lying at his feet. How many of you would be startled? He was. Who are you? He asked. I am Ruth, your servant, she said. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer of our family. You are a guardian redeemer of our family. This is a big deal. So she uncovers his feet. There's a lot of debate about what that means. There are some that try and say it's a sexual thing. What we know is both of these people are very high character. And so we think this is simply a way to wake him up, to uncover his feet so in the middle of the night he's like, whoa, it's drafty down there. What's going on? And he would see her. So she's lying there at his feet, and she says something incredible. She says, I am your servant. Now, that seems very normal to us. But what we understand is earlier in Ruth, when he meets her, she says, I am your servant. And that was like a slave, like a worker relationship. When she says servant here, it's a different word in the Hebrew. It literally means something more like, I am yours. I am yours. And it brings about a thought of a relationship. And then she's, sometimes women, maybe you've noticed this, sometimes men need a little more than a subtle hint. They kind of need a blunt, just straight 2x4 to the head of what you want. Any women know what I'm talking about? Yeah, okay. So she doesn't just leave it at, I am your servant. She takes it a step further, and she says, spread your garment over me. Bring me in. You are a guardian or a kinsman redeemer. And what that means, we're going to dive into a little bit. But basically what she is saying is, Boaz, I want you to pursue me in marriage. I want you to marry me. Now, this is a Moabite worker, a foreigner, slave, no rights, much, much younger than Boaz. Boaz is very old, we know at this point, not senior citizen old, but we know that he is much older than her. The language tells us that. He is an Israelite landowner, and here is a Moabite slave woman, younger than him by a significant margin, saying, I'm proposing to you. Marry me. This is crazy. You don't do this in this time period, in this culture. But what's interesting is when Boaz first met her, he prayed a blessing over her and said, while you arrive here in Israel, may the Lord spread his wings over you. And what's interesting here is just 2 chapters later, she's going to call him out and say, hey, that prayer of blessing that you prayed over me, you're the guy that's going to do it. You spread your wing over me. You spread your garment over me. You take me in. You give me protection. You marry me. So, what is he going to do? How does he handle this? It's the middle of the night. He's been woke up and proposed to by a foreigner slave woman. What's he going to do? Verse 10. The Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. And just stopping there for a second, what we learned from the beginning here is he is truly stunned that she's interested in him. He can't believe, he's like, you didn't go after any of the young guys, the in-shape guys, the rich or the poor guy. You're actually interested in me. He's stunned by this. And he can't believe that she pursued him. So then it continues on. Although it is true that I am the guardian redeemer of our family, there is one who is actually more closely related than I. Stay here the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good, let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here till morning. Now, let's dive into what that guardian redeemer means. So what we see is in the Old Testament, we talked about God put in provisions to take care of those that needed taken care of. So in Leviticus 25, the guardian redeemer would do this. The guardian redeemer was the nearest adult male relative to whatever male relative died. So if your brother died, you are now the guardian redeemer for your family, okay? And so what that would mean is if his family was forced to sell anything, to get rid of land, you had the right to buy it back for your family, and you would then provide for them. So what we learned in Deuteronomy 25 is there is a widow involved, that you, as a widow, were not allowed to marry outside the family, so they had this brother-in-law rule. And we talked about this before. If you died, if your husband died, his brother, your brother-in-law, would then marry you and try and give you children if you didn't have any children, because you needed people to provide for you. That was your only way. If you didn't have kids, you had no future. You had no one to take care of you in your old age. You had no house to live in. So kids were everything. So if you died a widow with no kids, your brother-in-law would step in and give you an heir so that there was someone to take care of you. Some of you are thinking about that and going, thank God we don't have that anymore. But here's what the kinsman redeemer or the guardian redeemer would do. When there was land that you were forced to sell, he would buy the land and allow you to live on it, and he would then be able to have it and work it and get money and provide for you, and he would then take you in and provide for you as well. That's what this person did. Here's the tension. She says, you're one of our relatives, you can do this, and the bad news is, she goes, yeah, but there's actually a dude that's closer than me, and so I don't actually have the right to do this, he does. So here's my plan. Ruth, I care about you so much, I want to get you provided for. I'm going to go talk to him and tell him that this is available, that he can purchase this land and he can be your husband and he can do all this. Here's the bad news. If he says yes, Ruth's got to go marry this guy. Now, can you imagine being Ruth? That in the next 24 hours, you're about to find out who your forced husband is going to be. How many of you would love something like that? So they go to bed and they sleep there. He says, stay here for the night. And they lay there thinking about this, about what's going to happen. And they have all this on their mind. I doubt they slept much, and this tension. And here's the beauty of the story. When we pause it right here, everything is in God's hands. Everything. In 24 hours, we're going to find out, do Boaz and Ruth get to be together? Is this other dude going to step in and take the land and take Ruth? Are they going to have love? Or what's going to happen here? And so everything's in God's hands. And we get to say, God, what are you going to do? How does this story come together? So it continues. Verse 14. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. That's a good thing. Keep it on the down low. And he said, no one must know that a woman came into the threshing floor. Keep this a secret. Okay. He also said, bring me the shawl you were wearing and hold it out. And when she did so, he pulled out 6 measures of barley and placed it into a bundle on her. Then he went back to town. This is probably like 75 pounds worth of grain. Ruth is strong, y'all. She's sturdy. All right. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, now here's the other side of this. Naomi is sitting at the house all night wondering, man, I hope this goes well. I just sent her to spend the night and try and get a husband. Please let her come home with a husband. So Ruth, it comes back. Naomi asks, how did it go, my daughter-in-law? And then she told her everything Boaz had done for her and added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then Naomi said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. Then we get to chapter 4. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat there, and just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along, Boaz said, come over here, my friend, and sit down. So he went over and he sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, sit here, and they did so. And then he said to the guardian redeemer, he's got a plan here. Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech, the father who died, Naomi's husband. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these people seated here and in the presence of the elders of our people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, for I will do so. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I am the next in line. Now, and he says, I will do it. Let's run this through his head right now. Right now, this man owns some land. He's got a family. And he says, okay, so if I buy this land, which I have the right to do as the closest guardian redeemer. I get this much land that I get to work on. Now, Naomi is old. She is past childbearing age, so all I need to do is take care of Naomi in her old age, and then this is inheritance for my kids and my sons. This is a good deal. So he says, I'm going to do it. And we step back and go, Boaz, what are you doing? Like, you're just giving Ruth away. Well, Boaz has a plan. Verse 5 through 10. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the land, by the way, let me just drop this in. On the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the foreigner, the slave, the Moabite from Moab, the country we hate, and the people who are pagans and awful. Yeah, that people. And the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with this property. Woo, this changes things. She is of childbearing age. If he gets this land, he has to marry Ruth and give her children that will be an heir. Those heirs will then get that land. So all he's doing is simply redeeming the land, giving it back to his family, which is what it was set up to do. But Boaz knows a little something that this guy probably wants no bit of this mess, working this land just for a little bit, only to watch it go away to this heir of these of whatever kids he has with this foreigner. So, at this, the guardian redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it. Now, in earlier times in Israel, the redemption and transfer of property became final. One party took off their sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions. Same thing you do when you buy a house today. You take off a shoe and give it to him. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself, and he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead of his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses. Now, here's where we end for today. This is truly an incredible love story. Because when we track with Ruth, what do we see? In chapter 1, Ruth is married, and her husband dies, and she becomes a widow. And so we see Ruth the Moabitess, the widow. In chapter 2, she arrives in Israel, and she is Ruth the slave, Ruth the servant, Ruth lowest rung in all of society. Then in chapter 3, we get to see something beautiful. Ruth, the wife. And we get to see this beautiful process that happens. And what looked like no hope all of a sudden becomes this beautiful picture. Where she was a widow and a slave and a foreigner and no rights, and all of a sudden she's provided for and taken care of. All of a sudden she's a wife of a wealthy landowner who's going to love her, take care of her, and provide her with children that will take care of them. This is a beautiful picture. And so today, a lot of times when we talk about marriage and we talk about this. Today, this is for singles. And if you're sitting here going, well, I'm not single, listen up. Because you know singles, or you're going to be raising children that you want to have them date the right way and have the right mindset. And so this is for all of us. And this is what I have to say to those that are single now. So all my single ladies, get that reference, there you go. Listen up. And gentlemen too. Our God is not just a God of protection, provision, and wisdom, but of love and passion, and he is writing your story too. He wrote a beautiful love story for Ruth that had ebbs and flows and roller coaster highs and lows, valleys and mountains. But listen to me. If there is still breath in your lungs, he is still writing your story too. And sometimes when we're single, maybe you have some teenage kids at home, or maybe you're an adult and you're single right now. Sometimes we don't want to be. We want to have someone with us. We want to be married. And we think, you know what? I want to be married, so maybe I should change my standards. And I can tell you the dark side of this. I have sat in a counseling room with wives that are weeping and going, you know what? I deserved all this. I deserved the abuse, or deserved the adultery, or I deserve the way he treats me, or the neglect. I deserve all this because all I wanted was to be married. And I saw all these warning signs, and I didn't care. I didn't care. And these are people that have settled, who lowered their standards just to be married. And so today, this is my encouragement. If you're single, I was single at one point, and I can attest, it's not fun. It's not always fun. You wonder, is something going to happen? Am I going to get married? Is this day happening? I have 3 sisters right now that are single. One of them is upper 30s. She would love to be married. I hope that she gets married. I don't know that's ever going to happen. And so this is my encouragement to you. It's kind of this is what I attribute it to. It's kind of an elevator versus stairs situation. And what I mean by that is this. You're standing there on the bottom floor. You got to get to the top floor. You push the button on the elevator, and it's taking forever, right? And the longer you wait, the more you start to debate your decision of waiting for the elevator, right? And you keep looking at the stairs and going, I could be there by now. I could already have what I want by now. I could already be where I said I wanted to be by now. And yeah, you know what? The stairs is unpleasant. It's not as fun as the elevator. It's not as fun as waiting. And I just get to zoom right up. But even though it's a little bit of work, I would be where I want to be right now. And so we sit there and we wait for the elevator, and the stairs are sitting there taunting you because they're predictable. They work. They're available. And it won't be as easy and as smooth as the elevator, but you will get there. And a lot of us, in our singleness, that's us. We're sitting there and we're having to debate. Am I going to commit to waiting, or am I going to give up and just take the stairs? And this is my encouragement. And let me put pause on this. When I describe what I'm going to describe for dating, let's be clear of what dating is. Dating is not just something to enjoy now before you get serious later. Does that make sense? There is one purpose of dating: finding your spouse. And so if you're in the mindset of, well, there's no real good prospects, so I'm just going to date some people to stay busy, that's not what dating is for. And so when I talk about the next 3 points that I have for those that are single, and for if you're going to give encouragement to your teenagers or whatever, dating is for marriage. And I think our teenagers and middle schoolers need to hear that the most. Dating is for marriage, not for just enjoying yourself and having a good time. That's not what it's all about. And there's a lot of hurt and pain and sorrow that comes from people that were just trying to have a good time and got in way over their heads. So let's be clear about that. But here are the 3 things to do while you're waiting on that elevator of love to come. And so if you want to write them down, you can. But here's the first one. Pick honorable non-negotiables and stay true to them. Pick honorable non-negotiables and stay true to them. What this means is simply this. God has standards of who he wants you to be with. Whether you're a male or female, God has standards. And the godly standards are not superficial. They are so important for everything that you need, because God designed love. So who better to tell you how to find love than the one who's created it, who has brought it into being. And he says these things. You know what? Find someone with faith and morality and be in the same community and integrity and maturity. Have the same mindset towards life. And you want to find someone with a repentant heart and a serving attitude. And so have these non-negotiables and stay true to them. Hold tight, don't settle. Understand that someone might not be the finished product that people can grow. Lord knows I can tell you, my wife did not get a finished product when she started dating me. And she had to mold and shape a lot of things. But walk is bigger than talk. You need to see some evidence of some of that stuff. Don't just sit there and say, well, I'm sure I can change this person into. No. You need to see some evidence of some of this stuff. Understanding that it can grow and it can get better and you can mold it and shape it. But you need to see some evidence of your non-negotiables that are there. The second one, don't create standards God could care less about. Do not create standards that God could care less about. That means if you say your ideal spouse is this height, this eye color, this bank account number, no body hair or lots of body hair, favorite band, professions, they're a good singer, certain body shape or sizes of certain parts, all those type of things, ridiculous. Ridiculous. God could care less about all of that. And girls have their list of things that they want in the perfect man, and guys have their list of things that they want in the perfect woman, but they are all shallow and they all turn out to be empty in the end. Guys, if you have some standard of what your woman's gonna look like, let me tell you, 30 years from now, she's not gonna look like that. You're gonna have to deal with that. Your wife's gonna give you some children, things are gonna change. So you better love her for something different than her body. Women, he is not always going to be the same person. He's going to mold and he's going to shape and he's going to change. And so the things that you think are important now might not be that important down the road. So what God says, here are the important things. Those are the important things. And what you have drawn a line in the sand and say, this is what I want, those you can just sweep away because they're pointless. Search for someone who shares your heart, not some fantasy person. Here's the third one. And this is most important. There's nothing wrong with you. Hear me on this. There is nothing wrong with you. If you are single right now, there is nothing wrong with you. It is not like, well, all these married people are so, no. Talk to some of our spouses. They'll tell you, they might wish they were single. There is nothing wrong with you. Just because someone is married, it doesn't mean that they have their life all together and everything's perfect and they're a good person. Married people, can you attest to this? Are your spouses perfect? Okay, so single people, there is nothing wrong with you. It's not like you popped out and God went, oops, that one fell. Yeah, let's just throw that back in the heap. That is not what happened with you. Finding a spouse is a good thing, but it is not the sole purpose of human existence. Don't squander your singleness by focusing on your waiting. Your value and your usefulness does not begin on your wedding day. And so pursue the things that God puts in front of you, and your waiting is not to be your wasting. Live your life. Do what God has called you to do. And whether you get married a long time from now or maybe it doesn't happen for you, God is the giver of all good gifts, and he will bless you with many blessings. It might not be marriage, but he will bless you with many blessings in this life. And he loves you. And God is the creator of romance and love and passion and intimacy and relationship. And so maybe here today, maybe you feel like you're in the desert. Maybe you're married and you're like, you know what? This marriage isn't everything I thought it would be. I don't have that romance. I don't have that spark. I don't have that intimacy. We don't have that connectedness. God is the author of love, and he can change it. Maybe you're married here today and you say, you know what? I settled. And this is my own fault. I have to live the rest of my life with all this extra struggle and baggage because I settled. But it's worth it. I'd rather settle than be alone. Don't settle. God, the author of love, can make it better. And maybe you're single here today and you're like, you know what? It's just not going to happen for me. It's not going to happen. No. So long as there is breath in your lungs, God is still writing your story. And it can happen. Do not lose hope. Because maybe some of us are like Boaz, where it doesn't look like anything's going to happen, and long into his life, and all of a sudden God plops this beautiful love story right in his lap, right at his feet. That's a good way to say that. Plops this beautiful love story right at his feet. Or maybe you're like Ruth, where you know what, I was married and then things went downhill and he died, or divorce, or all these struggles. You know what? I don't know that things are going to go back the right way. Yeah, God is the author of love. It can happen. And maybe some of you are like Naomi, where you have lost your love and it seems like life is over. No, life's not over. Even in your singleness, God has purpose for you, and God has blessings for you. Might not be another spouse, but God has blessings for you. And so today, as we step back, I think all of us can say, you know what, maybe in my relationships I'm impatient, or I'm unsatisfied, or I've settled, or I'm unfulfilled, or I'm disappointed. But here's the good news. This story of Ruth shows us that God knows what love is all about. And he can, if we just trust and pray and wait and do our part, God can still do something beautiful for you. He can repair a marriage. He can bring love that you never thought would happen. He can bring fulfillment that you never thought could be there. And he can bring companionship that you never thought you would have. God is the author of love, and this beautiful story of Ruth shows us that. And so now I want to go into a time of confession, if you would, as we bow our heads and close our eyes. And so often we try and tell God how to do this. And sometimes we just need to step back and say, you know what, God, you are showing us that you've got this. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you today, and Lord, so often in our lives, we try and be the boss. And we try and dictate it to you what you should do. And we try and tell you, Lord, I want to be with that person, or I want this to change in my marriage, or I want to find love in this way and that way and that way. Lord, sometimes we just need to wait. We just need to trust. And even when it's hard to trust, even if it's not with relationships, Lord, sometimes it can be so hard to wait and trust. Lord, forgive us for our impatience. Forgive us when we've stepped on your toes and hopped in your way to try and just do things ourselves. And forgive us for the messes that we make. Lord, this week we get to go before you, and we get to go to a time of confession where we get to confess all that weighs on our hearts, all the ways we've hurt others and hurt you. And you hear our prayers. So hear our prayer now. Lord, convict our hearts. Allow us to repent of what we need to repent of, and allow us to go out and forgive what we need to forgive, and to reconcile what we need to reconcile with you and with others. All this we lift up in your name. Amen.